Okay. Welcome to the second part of my lecture. I almost feel like a professor at the University of Latvia because my slides are not that beautiful as Larisa's, and my speech is normally messy. But getting back to, we register a certain problem here. Yeah, I was talking to Golicina, who is our sales director, and he pointed out one important aspect of my speech that may have misguided you. What I wanted to say is that it's not capital allocation and minimizing these reserves is not probably the main issue that should be our concern. We should be concerned about basically managing the risk, and if we manage the risk, they naturally will get down, probably. So yeah, getting back to this cycle that we thought of with qualitative sort of analysis, then loss collection and quantitative analysis and capital reserves formation. I will give you a brief overview of what we did at Medicinos Bankas, which is the second smallest Lithuanian bank, but a very ambitious bank, and who is actually doing much better than DNB Nord, if we have people in the house from DNB Nord, and other mid-sized banks in Lithuania, in that their attitude towards operational risk management is of the level of Swedbank or RCB these days. So when we arrived at the company, it was around 1.5 years ago, they had this loss registration software that probably banks here have, and it basically was a small Could you close that door? It was basically a web-based Java application where you could enter the loss data and some information about it. It was poorly used. Some departments didn't even use it because it was viewed as whistleblowing on other people and on themselves who registered. Java application where you could the guy who produced the software left the company, so basically then the system crashed down and they were left with nothing, and they had to collect this data because they wanted to apply non-basic indicator approach, either standardized or AMA. By the way, for standardized approach, in some supervisories require that you collect data as well for standardized approach. I don't know about Latvia, but there are some supervisors around the globe that require that. So whatever their first thought was, we basically had a client that had nothing. Well, we had a dysfunctional database. And their first request was, just to produce a small application to collect the losses. And we said, so what's the point? Okay, you've tried that. Nobody collects the data anyway. And then we got deeper into the subject, got to know Basel requirements and the request from them, because normally, this is one of the mistakes that we want to avoid, and that is, not understanding the client's needs, because normally, at least in Lithuania, it happens that the client knows what they want, so they just say, okay, just do it, make this software, we will collect the data and then calculate it, and that's it. Well, the normal approach or the right approach would be to ask, why do you need it for? So we asked it, and it turned out that it wasn't just about loss registration, but about incident elimination, problem elimination. So what we offered was a hybrid between sort of loss record and help desk. So we have, as a result, we have this web registration form, where probably at some companies it is realized the same way, implemented the same way. And basically, an employee enters the form, fills in the form, fills in his or her problem, and then based on this problem, we route this problem to various departments. So now I will show a few basically screenshots from the system and explain how it basically functions. Now I have to learn to use this computer. All right, this is Lithuanian. I'm sorry for that. You know, since I'm scared of traveling air Baltic these days due to spot air, you know, and I don't like fly LAL even though it is a Lithuanian company, I chose to drive today, and I couldn't change the Lithuanian thing because it was huge fog on the way. And sorry about that, but I will explain. So we model it in a business process management environment, in the business process management platform. So we have registration, which is the registration. Then based on the data that we've got here, we have an electronic classifier that classifies this problem. Okay, so if we had, say, if this bank didn't have an electronic self-assessment, even though we offered that model, if this bank had electronic self-assessment based on certain data here, we would prioritize this request, okay? Either request, problem, or loss, whatever. And then this electronic classifier directs, based on the data that we've registered, directs this loss to a certain department, which is in Lithuanian padalinius. So if you talk to your Lithuanian colleagues, you can use the word padalinius. It's very Lithuanian. What was really, I'm just trying to add some value. Okay, or if there's a problem, our smart classifier cannot classify it, okay? For instance, somebody entered an emotional problem and there is little data to it, we direct it to the risk department, to the operational risk department. Now, you can route this however you want, because Misha can do a very wide process, a very narrow process, whatever. Their selection was this classifier. If according to the classifier, if according to the data, we can classify and direct to the department solely, and then we direct it. If there is sort of confusion, then operational risk department selects which departments have to take care of it and direct it. Everything is done in the electronic form. And by the way, we use the same sort of principles with our clients when they have problems with our software as well. So after this has been solved, the problem, this is a sub-process that is taking place within the department that solved the problem. Then operational risk manager can take a look at the solution and evaluate it, or if there's a problem, can get a notification that this has been solved. This has been being solved for 2 weeks and then nothing happened, whatever. And then obviously Basel, which is a fancy word for database, we put all the data in the database simply as a loss collection. And everything that we gather along this path, we basically store in the database and can do any reports that we want, according to the business line, various risk categories, etc. We can map them into key risk indicators or whatever, etc. So, and at each of these steps, for each incident, you can have a clear cut view where this incident is at a certain point. So, for instance, let's take an example. Something is wrong with our policy issuing software or web policy issuing software. Say you cannot register because your computer is broken, so you call center or secretary or whatever. You register this. You indicate that there is a problem with web policy issuing system. It gets down to electronic classifier because there is a lot of data. It gets down to IT department, and in the IT department we can distribute to the guys who will fix it. Okay? So the sub-process is this. We got in the IT department the problem. the manager, in this case, it can be manager or IT partner. It can also be a specific person who is in charge of the group that handles problems. He or she can, appoint the responsible person who handles this, and etc. At this point, at each of these steps, we have certain business rules, right? So, if we say register, if we register a certain problem here, okay, say we did the self-assessment with the lady here, as we previously did, and this is external fraud, okay, and this is priority number 2 or number 1. According to electronic classifier, the electronic classifier, which actually is a set of business rules that you set up or the management sets up, we can put this task on the top of the list of the guys who handle it here. Okay. And that's how you, do I make myself clear more or less? Mm-hmm. Yeah? And that's how you basically manage those incidents. So it's not only loss registration, okay, which nobody does anyway, because when the loss, the logic is this: when the loss is resolved or the problem is resolved, nobody cares about registration. People will register only when they do have a problem or when a big problem happens. But when a big problem happens, the operational risk manager registers this loss. Okay? Because if the office burns in Valmiera, the first guy to know it will be the guy who buys insurance, operational risk manager most of the time, or finance director. So, yeah. When a person has a problem, or he finds or she finds something, some misuse or misguided information or misguided task, whatever, he or she registers it because it is a problem. Then it is directed throughout the process. We measure the time, that we spend solving this problem, and this is all reflected in the system. Now I'll show you some forms of the registration, etc. So say if it was me, if it was Juozas United, he would get this sort of form. He has data, he has the classifier of type of request in this case, or type of problem. You can classify whatever data you need here. So for instance, if you have IT problem, then you would say, okay, you use policy issuing system, administrative system, mail, many different systems. So the more you classify here, the easier it is to distribute down the road. I know it is funny because it's Lithuanian, but sorry about that. Next time we'll be laughing. So he fills the form. Juozas fills the form. He fills the form. Down here, he can basically, in this example, he assigns the rating or assigns the priority for his request, or make his personal. This is the choice of the bank. What we usually offer is that this rating should come from self-assessment. Okay, so if you do self-assessment, and if you see that in this case, this is IT example, but say our IT problem, our top priority, then we can assign this rating to be AAA automatic. In this case, they have typical standards. Standard & Poor probably are using AAA to CCC or something. So they use the same sort of logic here. So it is like an average problem in this case. So he registers, selects the rating. Down here, again, because this is fairly new system, after several cycles, we can even put a preliminary loss from this, okay? So for instance, if after a year I have 20 problems with my policy issuing, and at the end of the year we can calculate and approximately say that on average we lose 20 lats, okay, on each problem. We can put it here automatically, right? But because they don't have any data today, they sort of at each step they change it. Okay. So in this case, okay. So the path went along. We remember this this sort of scheme that I showed at the beginning. Ardiozes registered here, the classifier went through, the classifier understood that this is an IT problem, and the classifier sent it to the IT department. In the IT department, there are several options basically. If the request is classified very well, you can direct it to the guy who will handle it. If it's not, identified very well, then the manager of the group who handles things, say the support manager, appoints the guy who will take care of it. So in this case, the manager of IT department gets all the information that was sent to him and registered. He can, if there are attachments, he can take a look at the attachments, etc. And because the rating is BBB, which was changed, I didn't show the previous slide, but it went through, in this example, it went through the operational risk management, but it doesn't matter. So if it was changed to BBB or it was B, according to these ratings, with respect, this guy would get the deadline for elimination of this error, which in this case is 120 hours. And these deadlines are also set up by the management. So before you set up these rules, you decide that, okay, we have these priorities. This is our risk map, okay, according to various departments, and we set up different deadlines for elimination of such errors. And it can depend on the business unit, on the business line, on the type of request. However detailed you want to classify it, you classify it. So the guy here basically selects, in this drop-down list, he selects out of his employees who will handle this request. And this request, in this case, is sent to what we call the work group of that department, the group that handles such requests. Obviously, it may not be the specific group within that department created for the purpose of solving these tasks, okay? Sometimes, I can be a managing director of NEXUM IT, but for some problems I cannot assign anybody, so, there are certain problems that I have to handle. And I will waste my time on those problems, and this should be calculated as operational risk exposure, and adequately should be, a certain capital should be allocated for that as well. So in this case, the work group gets all the information, they know the deadline, they clarify all the issues, they solve it, and basically enter the data that they need, that they are asked for, that the operational risk department needs. And at the end, because we have this process, the process is directed at the end to the operational risk department. The operational risk department can take a look at each incident and evaluate whether it was handled correctly or not. Now, all the communication between the participants are conducted via emails. So, if I register a request and I have a problem with, say, IT or my underwriting policies, etc., it is sent, to, say, Gatis, who is the IT department director or whatever. It is sent to him by email. He gets the link in the email. He gets all the information and the deadline, and as well he has his own task list that can be integrated to his Outlook, so he can work all the time with. In general, he doesn't even feel that he has a separate system working, together with other systems that he's using. So, and in these task lists, he can see whether these are urgent tasks, whether these are active, or in certain areas he can select to see how his department is doing, etc., etc. So reporting is basically across the place. Okay, in this case, I can see all the tasks that I have completed. So what this, I think this is the end slide. Yeah. So what this gives us is basically this. We not only register losses, we try to help people, okay? And that's why they're willing to register. And it has worked dramatically well for the bank that we work with. As I said, compared to a mid-sized bank that is probably 10 times bigger than them, that has 50 losses, 50 incidents during the year, they've had 250 requests in 2 months. And obviously not all of them are losses, but as I said, they give you certain hints as to where your exposures may be. And these small losses are very important because they may not even be losses, as I said. They may be problematic areas. And when you have problematic areas and nobody pays attention to you, they become habits, because you have worked some workarounds, etc., etc. And once they become habits, they become culture. Once they become culture, they're very difficult to detect. And then you call Larisa, and she comes with a bunch of consultants, and they identify problem areas, doing process audits, etc. Or you call Tomas. So the key point is here: do not try to basically collect only losses. Try to sort of hide this loss collection or identification of problematic areas through sort of helping people. And exactly, it's not helping people, you actually do help them, that way. And you get the understanding of your problematic areas in the operations. So, the whole platform is built that way that we can not only calculate the total losses, but we can assign, certain costs to individuals that participate in this process, and basically calculate both explicit and implicit costs. Yeah.
You forget about one important thing, which we said in the beginning about what this helps is how to implement in life the written processes that we
Yeah, this is the point that I will get back now. In fact, if we get back to the scheme here, yeah, you're right. Thanks for that. As you see, there are certain rules, okay, and you may have these rules in place at your current workplaces as well. I mean, say if we have a loss or we have a problem, then you go to all this, and then all this will direct you to this, etc., etc. Okay, but it normally never happens. Okay, it doesn't work that well, or at least it isn't efficient, or you cannot measure it. Now you can apply the same sort of process technology to any other processes that you are, conducting within your organization. So, for instance, we are using. Okay, I will give you an example with my friend Ernst here. Internal fraud at insurance company. Okay, there is a car claim, a casco claim, say, and me being a claims manager and Misha being a worker at the service or manager of the service company, we agree that this loss will be 50,000. Okay, and then we will sell the car parts and earn another 45. Okay, this is an example from the first lecture. The way we do it, we structure the same sort of process for. The way we handle such risks is we structure this sort of process for claims management. Okay, so when casco claims comes in, say it's 50,000. Okay, there are certain rules that direct this 50,000 to certain people. Okay, there is a classifier. It is a casco claim, 50,000. This is too big, but whatever. It is a casco claim. It's 50,000, and it's BMW. Whatever. Okay, it is directed to me because I handle it. I should be handling these claims according to the paper. And if I then direct them to Misha, and if we can see, in the whole process that I always direct such claims to Misha, there may be an issue with me and Misha. So this is just a very simple example, but in general, in claims management or in underwriting loans or in any other process that you're conducting, you can use these technologies. Because for instance, for claims management, the rules are very important. Okay, so if there is a claim and it is a motor claim and it is a casco claim, then it is directed to one individual. If it is a motor claim and it is under 5,000, I should be handling it. If it is a motor claim and it is above 5,000, you should be handling it. And with these sort of classifiers and rules, you can achieve that. And we don't even have to think about whether it is my claim or not. It is directed to me. Therefore, the manager, has set up this process. If the manager, like I say, has decided to increase my limit and and put 10,000 for me, then I will get the claims under 10,000, and you will get the claims over 10,000. Okay, and we don't need to have this sort of papers passing and emails, coming to us, and we don't have to read the attachment and understand the new rules. Okay, the rules are here. And therefore, you can secure that the procedures that you want to implement are indeed implemented. Am I clear? Is that your point? Okay. And same with loans underwriting. I mean, we have several leads. Now they are gone because nobody is giving loans to anybody. But we had leads in loans underwriting where it used to be a very intensive process at the bank. And there was a problem of losing, say, potential client because it was just too much work, and we couldn't, or making a mistake because some analyst calculates things or ratios in a different way, etc., etc. So what we were offering to do was that, we gather the data electronically as much as we can. Then we, through certain classifiers, we get these ratios, okay, and put them in the business rule engine, and so the business rule engine throws back the answer. Okay, you're interesting for us. You're not interesting for us. It's not like a scoring system, but it's even more basic than scoring system. So, for instance, if it is a transport, say today we decided we don't take transport, okay, as potential clients. What can you do? You can write emails to everybody, or write a big paper and sign it. Or you can put it in here that transport is off. That's it. And if people are entering this type of data, it's automatically, it will never get to the credit committee. Because it is operational loss as well. Things that shouldn't get to credit committee, they get to credit committee. I mean, it's totally stupid because the salespeople wasted their time and now credit will waste their time. So it is a technology that can be used not only for operational risk management and loss elimination and collection, but also other processes as well. $5 there? Yeah, and this gets back, actually, do I still have time? Till 1 o'clock? I'll just briefly, one last remark about where it fits here. Actually, what we are doing here in process analysis and process changes and optimization is exactly this. We implement that technology, that process technologies in the processes that are key to function. So, for instance, if I, as a consultant, was to come to any company and start doing, or if I, as an operational risk manager at any company, was to start doing operational risk management program, the first thing I would do would be to basically draw down what kind of processes I have and different rules. I mean, okay, underwriting, we underwrite like this. Okay, well, how does it reflect in the systems? Okay, this reflects in the systems. These are steps outside the systems, and here we are making mistakes. Okay, so there's a gap, there's a process gap, what I call. And we can optimize, or we can eliminate this gap by introducing BPM technologies, business process management technology. It is the same like with this claim issue or with an underwriting issue. Okay? You calculate your ratios outside the system. Okay? You calculate your ratios outside the system, you put the ratio in financial ratio. If we talk about liquidity ratio, I can calculate liquidity ratio 3 different ways. And any analyst can calculate liquidity ratio three different ways. It all depends on the assumption. Then you put it in, then you put it into the system, and it can, you know, it can allow you to go further, say to credit quality. Whereas if you decide that there's only one correct formula, and you put it in here, and you ask me to only put in the balance sheet and income statement of my, you know, potential client instead of ratio. You know, it is a simple example, but that's how you eliminate those process gaps, and this is what we do, you know, with BPM technology. Correct? Okay. I think I will thank here. I can speak for hours about AMA, but the key point about advanced measurement approach is that you have to have really not so many things in order to qualify. You have to have self-assessment, the qualitative part, collect a lot of data so that you can prove that your statistical model can be statistical. And and just say to the supervisor, look, I have 5 years of data, and my actuary did this fantastic model, and we need not 15 but 7%. That's it. It's not difficult. It's not a rocket science, really. Not many institutions have qualified because not many institutions have data. One more thing. I wanted to comment on Larisa's presentation with regard to external data. There is this point that for large losses, because the distribution is so low and there are very few instances, supervisories and EU and everybody else advises to use external data. This may be a bit difficult because there are data exchanges worldwide where banks gather and sort of exchange this data and model each other, but it may not be very sort of practical in the Baltic case because we are a bit different, process-wise, people-wise, system-wise, etc. So we had this idea of setting up, at least in Lithuania, the sort of pool or data exchange of operational risk for Lithuanian banks and insurance companies, so that you can exchange, so that you could exchange between yourselves this information and model sort of your exposures together. Because indeed, in the operational risk, there can be no competition. I mean, you are, it is the goal of the supervisory that you are, financially sound and your risks are well managed. But in Lithuania, it's impossible because there is the competition commission that the data out, for example. And I don't know about that. Maybe it's possible. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would like to ask a question regarding the possibility of minimizing the big risks. For instance, some risks we can minimize through insurance. Some risks, perhaps the process risk or human factor is possible, we can minimize purchasing IT system, but all these solutions usually attract additional operational risks themselves. So is it your point of view that we also would do all the same process for risk assessment of these risk minimization tools? And if yes, so what would be the average acceptable proportion between the losses that we can suffer without this reinsurance or IT system, or additional provisions which we have to make because we use them?
It is a very good question. I remember when we first did it, even we got several complaints through our own system about our own system. So it does happen. I mean, I think the key point here is that obviously I completely agree that the more things you have, the more operational risks you have associated with these things. But actually, in this case, in the case of data collection and management, I think that without such tools, you cannot analyze anything. this is the key. This is the key to get from this day, I think. Now, in terms of solving it with IT, it is always a trade-off. You have to apply this creativity, and I am a proponent of the notion that operational risk management is a very creative field. And obviously there is a scientific side to it, and I agree that the more systems you have, the more plugins you have, the more risk you carry. But it is it is a matter of right, correct implementation or wrong implementation, and choosing the partner. I think that the point with data collection, otherwise, if you don't know how to collect data, how can you tell? So I don't think that this particular such tools carry a lot of operational risk. The only operational risk that they carry is that people will not use them. And you will get not complete picture, etc., etc. But I think that in terms of the Baltic experience, there have been very few cases where sort of pure loss collection worked. And I'm personally quite happy with this.
It's really interesting to address this point of view of input, investment, and losses in regard of the financial market crisis.
Well, I think that there is a certain threshold, and I think people tend to say, yeah, these approaches are very nice, but it's so costly, to even take a look at them, because normally you have to spend hundreds of thousands of euros to do it properly. And sometimes you calculate, and it makes sense to put aside 15%, and that's it. But it's not even a point about this. Sometimes without such tools, you cannot even see what you have at hand, and that's the problem. That's the problem. I don't know if that answers your question. I would love to see, the sort of threshold of where, I am this size bank, and it makes sense for me to do this. Or I am this size bank, and it absolutely makes sense for me to do this. But it's very difficult with operational risk because, as Larisa has rightly pointed out, it is such a fresh field that, proper risk management programs were at Bank of America, who doesn't exist probably anymore. They were like Freddie Mac, fantastic operational risk management program, but they had different problems. Okay, you may clap.